So, thank you again. The original title of the talk that I'd said I was going to give was 730 days from now, a sort of look into the next 2 years. And I realized that given the sense of urgency that I think most people are feeling in this market, as well as the fast pace in which things are changing, 730 days is probably way too long a time horizon. So I kind of altered it a little bit and said we should really focus on the next 365 days and what is going to be realistic for people to accomplish in the next 365 days, as well as the kinds of changes you can expect to see happen. Now, we are at an amazing sort of pinnacle, at a step in the road in humanity. So if you think about this great fork in the road, we're standing at a place where as human beings we've never actually been before. You have on the one hand unbelievably sophisticated technological change. So all of the hoopla that you had heard about what was going to happen in the internet era and all the grandeur about the change of the web and what was going to occur has actually happened. And it's quietly happened. The hoopla passed us, and the actual reality has occurred where we are seeing more technological change since the Gutenberg moment than we've ever seen in our lifetime. You then take a look at demographic change. So on the other fork in the road, you have a change in the ages and grouping of humanity that we have never actually quite seen historically. So enormous groupings around similarities, changes between demographics, but we are seeing the biggest demographic swelling that we have ever seen effectively since the beginning of time. The third is environmental. So if you look at the environmental change, we're now facing a moment where we all know the challenges environmentally, but we're now at a place where the Earth's core is at its hottest temperature that it's been since the melting of the polar ice caps. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you saw the news today, that a chunk of the Arctic ice cap, off the polar ice cap, just broke off the size of New York City, which is now believing to be one of the first major deteriorations that we're seeing in the Arctic that was projected to come because of global warming, but now is actually here. And that fourth kind of rung in the road that we face is financial. So we now stand in an era where we are facing one of the worst financial meltdowns, a complete reconstruction of the financial system since the Great Depression. And some would argue, by the way, potentially a rebound just as fast. So as a human being, you kind of stand at this fork in the road and realize we've never actually been here before, where all of these sort of forces have pushed into one element, and it's a pretty bizarre and challenging time, let alone to be in business, or to be an entrepreneur, or to be in innovation, but just to be a person living on this planet. So if you think about the next 365 days, you have to think of it from that perspective of standing at that fork in the road and figuring out how you navigate through these very, very complicated waters. So I think societally and historically, there were three major turning points that happened over the last, I would say, 2 years. This was the first turning point. It was the turning point for us. And what you're looking at is a photograph of an intake officer at the Houston Astrodome during Hurricane Katrina. And Hurricane Katrina is where we saw the first shift over from traditional linear media broadcast into a community-style, user-generated run event, news event, where we, the people, actually reprogrammed the news business. And this is a great example of that. This was a woman at the Houston Astrodome who had run out of paper, wrote down the names and addresses of survivors on her hand, photographed that hand and uploaded it to us and several other websites in hope that people would see the names and phone numbers and be able to reunite families. No one would have ever thought that traditional media would have been used in this way to reunite people, and we were responsible for reuniting hundreds of families during Katrina. But what was interesting about that turning point was the media was reporting on the disaster, the tragedy, the issues, but what people actually needed was information about getting to their families.